Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldron. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, December 10th, 2018. Time for another show. Didn't pay any attention to the weekend. Anything happen? Anybody notice anything happening either Friday afternoon or over the weekend? Maybe President of the United States getting himself in trouble? Don't know? All right. Well, if you don't know, I don't know. We're on equal ground there and equal footing, and we'll be able to bring Greg Dworkin in to tell us exactly what happened and the import of it all. But I figured it out in case you were wondering this morning. I did see everyone enjoying the president's early morning tweets about smocking guns. That was unexpected, to say the least. But there it is. He's gone ahead and done it. And like everything else, I guess now we have to try and justify the use of the improper spelling. That if Kov-fe-fe can mean something or be taken to mean something by the MAGA troops, then certainly this can too. I figured a smocking gun is probably, I think maybe he's thinking of a t-shirt cannon. That could be a smocking gun. You can just running around the stands, smocking the fans, smocking them in the head with smocks. Usually extra large t-shirts anyway, so they can be used as smocks by the kids in school. That probably explains everything. And therefore, don't impeach him, because it's politically risky, yada, yada, yada. You know how this goes. We'll have to catch up on all of what happened, all of the filings that went on or that we heard about on Friday afternoon. And apparently it goes straight to, I guess the weekend's punditry debate was all about, sure, they're impeachable crimes, but either it's a bad idea or you can't do it, or wait for other crimes and impeach them for those. Some debate about that. It's a familiar debate and a familiar MO. Impeachment, apparently, still scary to everybody. And I suppose if you're sitting on other developments which may lead to things that would more clearly, I guess all you can really say, you're never really going to get to something that will more clearly move Republicans to vote for impeachment, but more clearly, or make it more embarrassing, clearly, to members of Congress and the electorate when Republicans refuse to go along. That could basically be it. And perhaps they're waiting for those, because they have, I guess, yet to develop. But I guess the strongest evidence so far of the fact that something has actually happened here is the Cohen filings over the weekend. And I guess that what they have them dead to rights on at the moment, but for the fact that everybody for some reason believes you can't indict a sitting president. I say just wait for him to stand up and indict him then. That would work with those guys. Is that he's committed campaign finance violations, and now the troops are out for the Republican side, insisting that either those are process crimes and therefore not interesting, or they're only technically crimes, or they're not very serious, or they're so complicated that no one can really understand them. And I guess Rand Paul made that his line at some point over the weekend, and that was kind of astonishing, except that campaign finance law is a little bit complex. But I do remember, harken back to the time that Donald Trump once said, back in the 80s, when he was insisting that President Reagan should put him in charge of negotiating nuclear disarmament treaties with the Soviets, that, a subject as complex as, let's say, nuclear arms, which he would be negotiating about, was something he could learn everything you need to know about nuclear missiles in an hour, hour and a half, because he has a very good brain, and his uncle taught at MIT, and it would all be just fine. Hour, hour and a half, and he could do all the negotiating over, the complex weaponry that could destroy every living being on the planet, and do it with the Soviets, and get it all finished before lunch, I guess. Sounds like we got some interference on our line here, Craig, but I suppose if I let you start talking, it'll go away.
Isn't that always the case?
Yes, I think so. Everyone else, stop interfering. He's about to.
Okay, there we go.
All right.
You know what? I'm going to start actually, with just a few international items, just to make sure that we list them and acknowledge them.
Oh, all right.
This is mostly a domestic policy show discussion. That's what we do at Daily Kos. We're focused on America, America first, make America great again, all that stuff.
Right.
But things that happen overseas do matter, and they matter a lot. And so 3 quick items I wanted to mention.
All right.
Firstly, although Angela Merkel will be stepping down as leader of the free world, the German conservatives actually picked one of her allies to be party leader. So instead of ceremoniously being booted out, she'll slowly decline, which is probably good for international law and the free world. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Over in Japan, the head of Nissan has been arrested, and he and the company have been indicted for basically stealing money from the company, building homes that Nissan paid for, hiding his assets. In other words, doing all the things that CEOs in the U.S. do all the time, except in Japan it's illegal.
Oh. All right.
And that has implications for Nissan and Renault and their merger/partnership, and the entire auto industry has been roiled by that at a time that, for example, GM in this country is having its own issues in terms of what to produce, and will Americans buy anything other than giant boats with their own zip codes, that sort of thing. And the third thing, which is also of great interest, I think, and should be, is that Theresa May came up with this last-minute Brexit agreement with the European Union, which she is now supposed to bring to British Parliament to get approved, and she doesn't have the votes.
Oh, I say.
So she's pulled it, and the question is, if she goes for a vote and loses, that'll bring down the government, but if she refuses to do a vote because she will lose, does that bring down her government?
Well, let's find out.
So something of a British pickle there.
Oh. And
she'll have to sort that out.
Oh, I say. I'm just going to say I say all day long. I'm not sure what that means, but I saw it in movies where they do that.
A gherkin, as it were, So, these aren't things that we're going to spend a whole lot of time about. I think we're going to talk about domestic stuff here.
Okay.
But we have a lot of international friends and people who are interested in international things, and I just like to acknowledge it now and again.
All right. Done. That's the rest of the world. Now on
Okay,
to
good.
America.
Now we can move on. So today, I think, I'm going to rely a lot on the pundit roundup. The big story there is that Donald Trump is having trouble dealing with the reality of the Mueller investigation. Oh. And, of course, on Friday we had those 3 court filings, or as we like to say on the Internet when you're not a lawyer and you like to play one like I do, is I don't even like to play one, but sometimes you have to pretend to be one so you sound like a very serious person. In open court, things have been filed that make it sound like Donald Trump is a unindicted co-conspirator.
Yeah.
That he's committed crimes. And the crimes that he's committed have to do with the Southern District of New York filing on Michael Cohen, because he paid Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal to shut up at a time that the Access Hollywood tape had come out, and more allegations about him having affairs would have sunk his presidency.
Oh.
So he didn't do it to protect his family. He did it to protect his presidency. And the way we know that is because he didn't list those payments to Michael Cohen properly when he filed his campaign finance stuff. And the thing is that Rand Paul and others can say, oh, well, it's just a process crime. Actually, what it was is Donald Trump wanted to be president, felt like this scandal would sink him, and therefore he paid people to be quiet about it so that the American people would not know what was really going on at a time that it was crucial to know. So he lied to the American people and threw smoke and tried to hide stuff.
Yes.
And
well, he
so,
did.
That's a big deal. And the way you know it's a big deal is the reaction to both the Congress, from the Congress, and from the pundits over the weekend. Of course, the other big parts of the court filings were the Mueller side of it, not the SDNY side, where, and we'll go into this in a little bit more detail, but lots of stuff came out in terms of contact with Russians and other things that really suggest that Trump has some major issues there in terms of conspiracy. And it's gotten to the point where Democrats, for example, are starting to talk about impeachment because they feel like they have to, because you have high crimes and misdemeanors. You have lying to the public, which is what Richard Nixon did to cover this stuff up. And they can't avoid it. And because they are going to be in the majority in Congress, in the House, and because elections have consequences, then you can't ignore the fact that the majority party in the House is starting to talk about impeachment, and that's making the Republicans nervous. For example, Washington Post has this one entitled, and this is the first piece I have in the pundit roundup, Siege Warfare. Republican anxiety spikes as Trump faces growing legal and political perils. Okay. And just this paragraph alone is remarkable. Facing the dawn of his third year in office and his bid for re-election, Trump is stepping into a political hailstorm. Democrats are preparing to seize control of the House in January with subpoena power to investigate corruption. Global markets are reeling from his trade war. The United States is isolated from its traditional partners, which is why I wanted to talk a little bit about international stuff. The investigation by Special Counsel Robert S. Mueller III, Bobby Three Sticks, into Russian interference is intensifying, and court filings Friday in a separate federal case implicated Trump in a felony.
Dope.
That's a hell of a paragraph.
Yeah.
Now, in that same article, the White House is adopting what one official termed a shrugged shoulders strategy for the Mueller findings, calculating that most GOP base voters will believe whatever the president tells them to believe.
That's true. I don't believe he'll ever step into a
It's true that they think that.
Yes.
Okay. Piece here from Julian Zelizer, CNN. Will the Republican Party turn on Trump? The theory is that partisanship will save this president. After all, Republicans will still control the Senate with an even larger majority, so the likelihood of their support in any impeachment proceedings is slim. Republicans have stood by silently as the president ignores norms, threatens institutions, and conducts his erratic term in office. When it comes to taking a stand, congressional Republicans have done nothing to demonstrate they privilege governance over partisanship. But through the past 2 years, suggest Trump is immune to the fallout that could result from the emoluments case or a damning Mueller report, or the SDNY case. In short, the answer is no. The same intense partisanship within the Republican Party that has protected Trump until this point could just as easily turn against him. That's the essence of intense partisanship. In other words, if your decision-making, Mitch McConnell, for example, isn't about loyalty to the president, but it's whether or not this stuff can actually redound on the reputation of the Republican Party, and Trump is standing in the way of keeping power, then Trump becomes disposable.
Okay.
Now, there are people who think the GOP will never drop their support and nothing will ever change. But let me point to you some tea leaves over the weekend that give you an idea of just how much this is upsetting Republicans.
Oh, no.
Right? We get the court filings, and then what happens? All of a sudden, Trump tries to change the subject and announces that John Kelly will be leaving the White House.
Yes. And not just
Did he fire John Kelly? We don't know that. We think he just went in, turned the lights off, and changed the locks on the office. But he announces that. So who is going to be his next chief of staff? Everybody knew it was going to be Nick Ayers. Right. Who is Nick Ayers? Nick Ayers is a political consultant. That's a very polite way of saying what I'll describe to you. Who is the chief of staff for Mike Pence. But before that, he was the campaign manager for Eric Greitens, the disgraced Missouri governor, who had to step down because he had locked and tied up a woman in his basement.
Yeah, I forgot.
And was sexually molesting her.
Whoops.
So we were going to trade a racist jerk for a political hardball a-hole.
Okay. And probably a racist jerk.
Probably. Well,
I don't have those.
Otherwise, he wouldn't work there.
I don't have the paperwork around for that, but yeah.
Who was supposed to be there in order to help with Trump's so-called reelection. Well, guess what? He didn't take the job.
He did not.
In fact, I think he's leaving the White House altogether.
Wow. They're not going to tie him up in the
basement. So then they said,
all?
Right? So they're going to have to tie him up in the basement and do things to him. So maybe he'll change his mind. So the next thing is they said, okay, well, we got other people here. We got Mick Mulvaney. We got Stephen Mnuchin. We got, somebody or other. Every name that they've mentioned has said no.
Mick Mulvaney should be busy.
Well, I mean,
they all should
what
be
you're
busy.
really seeing here,
this would be his
these are young, ambitious people
job.
who had the opportunity to work in the White House in like the second most important job in the country. No matter what the mayor of New York says, it's still the second most important job in the country to be chief of staff to the president. And you have people who don't want the job,
right?
Who are fleeing, as, dare I say it, rats flee from a sinking ship. I mean, the whole pattern of everything that's happened over the weekend with I'm looking at Twitter and watching the pundits chat with each other, as is very good for Twitter to show people. And we've gone from talking about Trump's chances of re-election to Trump's chances of finishing out this term.
I like it.
So do I. But I mean, for those people who say nothing will ever change, it's always going to be the same, this Friday was really a watershed.
Oh, okay.
Things have changed.
Well, you keep saying that. So YOLO, LOL, nothing
and things
ever
keep
changes. Not that, I guess.
Yeah.
We always just keep saying nothing ever changes.
Right.
So I'll just
but they change all the time, and the stuff below the surface. Again, support for Nixon was absolutely rock solid until it wasn't, and then it just crumbled.
Okay.
When you don't have foundations, the entire edifice can come down fairly easily.
He has none. Or the one he has is correct.
None. He has no basis of anything except himself. Is Don Jr. in the crosshairs? Absolutely. From the Mueller stuff that we'll talk about. Is Jared Kushner, between the stories talking about how callow and naive he is in regard to Mr. Bonesaw, the current leader of Saudi Arabia, and the rest of the family and the kind of trouble they're in. I mean, the whole thing is really starting to fall apart. It's there for people to see. And I get, and this is where we go back to a discussion we had long ago about the Myers-Briggs S people versus the N people, the intuitive folks versus the ones who need to see everything spelled out. So for those who need to see everything spelled out, you had the court filings on Friday. And for the intuitive people who get a sense of what's going on without having all the data, you already knew this was happening, and now is the time that it seems to be happening. So it's all pulled together in a way. And let me just mention one other thing, and that is that and you've talked about this on the show for a long time, the financial aspects of being on wingnut welfare are important.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Conservatives don't like reading things that don't agree with their side. They hate it. Right. They won't do it. All right. So if you become an apostate, like Charlie Sykes, no more radio show. If you become an apostate like Bill Kristol, Weekly Standard Magazine is all of a sudden in financial trouble.
Yeah.
You have to be on the Trump train in order to get conservatives to continue to read you and get your wingnut welfare. Otherwise, who else is really interested in your opinion?
Job.
So a Weekly Standard announced they were having trouble, but they may have found a buyer. They may exist. It's of interest to me because it's really the most prominent non-Trump publication that still exists. National Review is now, Trumpy. Certainly the Federalist, that nobody knows who pays for the Federalist is Trumpy.
That's Trumpiest.
Nobody reads the American Conservative. They're not, but nobody even knows who they are. Even though I like Daniel Larison and a couple other people there. So what do you do with this? And to give you an example, they have an editorial by their opinion people. They don't name it, but it says what the Cohen memos mean. Okay. And what they say is that's precisely why the sentencing memorandums filed by prosecutors on Friday are so important. They condense the facts, the ones we know already anyway, into a single narrative easy to understand. The two memos in question were filed Friday afternoon by prosecutors of both Mueller and the U.S. Attorney's Office of the Southern District of New York, or the Sovereign District as everybody calls them, because they don't pay attention to what Washington does and they do their thing, and concern the crimes of President Trump's longtime personal attorney and fixer Michael Cohen. Trump exploded on Twitter when law enforcement first began poking around Cohen last May, and now it's easy to see why. The reports assert that Trump both directed Cohen to buy the silence of women claiming to have had sexual affairs with the candidate and used them as a go-between to conduct business deals in Russia far into his presidential campaign, deals that both Cohen and Trump claimed were scotched long before they were. The documents are, even for those skeptical of the left's collusion narrative, deeply incriminating.
Oh.
And then goes on to say why. So that's a conservative magazine who's, coming to the realization that this is like real stuff and you can't just ignore it.
Okay.
All right. And let me give you just a little flavor of this from, of all people, Axios, who actually did a good job in making it simple.
Axios. Okay.
Jim Vandehei. What we now know about Trump and Russia. This will allow you to be smart.
Oh, good.
Right? Be smart. The scary thing for Trump, Mueller knows a hell of a lot more than we know now. Okay, we already knew that.
Yes.
But we now know several Russian officials reached out to a half dozen Republicans very close to Trump and his campaign, including his eldest son, his closest advisor, his lawyer, and his campaign manager. We now know they took meetings often enthusiastically during and after the campaign. We now know Russia offered in those chats campaign assistance, which they called synergy. It's not collusion, it's synergy. Okay?
I see.
Synergy, they call it, political synergy. And there's all these little red hats now, the little hats that say Make America Great Again. They now say political synergy on them.
Yeah, great.
We now know no one around Trump alerted the FBI of this effort to subvert our elections. We now know no one around Trump alerted the FBI of this effort to subvert our elections. That's like a big deal. And that's why, if you're going to subvert elections, my thought is if you can't find anybody to be chief of staff, you can always get Mark Harris. He's very good at subverting elections, and he already is totally comfortable working with crooked people. So why not him for chief of staff? He's never going to be a congressman.
Right.
We now know that 12 Russian intelligence officers were indicted for hacking the DNC and systematically releasing material for the purpose of hurting the Clinton campaign via WikiLeaks. We know that Trump associates Roger Stone and Jerome Corsi attempted successfully in some instances to get in touch with WikiLeaks, and they're under investigation for whether they had advanced knowledge about the dumps. We now know Donald Trump Jr. and others took a meeting with Russians promising dirt on Hillary Clinton, and we now know Don Jr., when approached with the promise of dirt, wrote, "If it's what you say, I love it," especially later in the summer. We now know Trump was negotiating a Trump property in Moscow during the presidential campaign and hid this from the public and lied about it. We now know Mueller believes, based on his court filing, the Moscow project was a lucrative business opportunity that sought and likely required the assistance of the Russian government, hence the reasons to get rid of sanctions, because Russian banks would be funding this. And by the way, Trump was in line to get hundreds of millions of dollars when his usual marketing, putting his name, individual one tower, that kind of thing, is usually $1 million or $2 million. So it was like a big payday. We now know every arm of the U.S. intelligence community concluded Russia sought to systematically influence the election outcome. We now know this was a unanimous conclusion, save one dissent, Trump. We now know Trump officials continued talking with the Russians during the post-election transition. We now know Jared Kushner and Jeff Sessions failed to initially disclose any contacts with Russians. We now know Jared Kushner suggested secret back channel with the Russians. We now know Trump soured on FBI Director James Comey, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, and White House counsel Don McGahn, in part over the handling of the probe. We know Paul Manafort, who ran the Trump campaign in the summer 2016, lied about his Russia contacts, was indicted, and is going to jail. We now know Flynn lied about his Russian contacts, was fired, and pleaded guilty. We now know Cohen lied about his Russian contacts, which was and was indicted and then flipped to become a key witness. And that's just what we know. And Mueller knows a lot more than that. That's a lot of stuff.
It is. I think he did it.
I think he did it too.
I don't know.
Democrats think he did it, and Republicans are starting to think he did it, which is why nobody wants to work for him anymore.
Oh. Well, I mean, if no one will do it, would I
that's
do
an
that
end
job?
thing to say. I don't have a piece of paper that says, I'm not taking this job because I think you're guilty and I don't want my own career to go down the tubes. I'm saying I'm inferring this from looking and seeing what's going on here.
Yeah, you would think. Although, again, Mike Mulvaney...
And then 2 weeks from now, somebody will be interviewed, and somebody will say that, and they'll say, oh, my God, look at this news.
Yeah, I guess that's true. And people will say, where did you find that out so long ago? I don't know. I read it in Axios.
Why don't we talk to the people who thought the Iraq War was a big mistake? That would be us.
Yeah, well, we're too busy. I just got a call, asked me to be chief of staff. And
did you say yes or no?
I said yes. I figured I'd do it, and I'm doing it for the M&Ms, the Air Force One M&Ms. I don't want any money from these guys, but I think it's worth doing. I'm gonna talk to the press anonymously all the time. It's gonna be great. I'll get fired pretty quick too.
I'm gonna end this segment again by going back to November 30th. This is a Jonathan Bernstein article in Bloomberg. Trump is losing his influence. The president can no longer count on his party support. That suggests dangerous times ahead, and that was before the court filings.
Yes, that's true. Although, there are some wackos for whom the court filings will reinforce their loyalty, just hopefully not enough of them.
Always. There's always going to be a core group of people. PRRI says 14% of the population, no matter what he does, will stick with him. I would point out 40% is really a small number.
Yes. Well, I guess we'll get to find out about it, and people will be interviewing them in diners anytime now, and we'll have to read that over our winter break when that comes around. When the kids are out of school, it'll be all about how they're hunkering down in their all-American diners and deciding to remain solid Trump supporters. Only 14% of them, but it's everybody in the diner. That's the bad news.
Well, you got to go back and interview them over and over and see if they've changed their mind. That's really the whole play there.
Clearly.
So on the other side of the break, I'm only going to stay with you for a few minutes because I got to go scoot off to work, which makes
keep saying this.
Bill in Portland, Maine, right about why do you keep saying that? Are you using a scooter?
Right. Yeah. That's what do you use? It's too cold for a scooter.
Yeah, I use my regular old car.
All right. Well, pretty soon then, on your way back to work, make sure you have a no smoking sign up in your office. Make sure no one does anything like that today. Okay. Well, let's see. We'll return.
Monica Lewinsky tweeted, by the way, no smoking, please.
Monica Lewinsky is mocking this?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
That's how bad it is.
I think you got everybody now. All right, good.
Lost
Welcome
Monica,
to the show.
You've lost everything.
Pretty much. All right, we'll be right back in 2 minutes. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back. We're back on the air here. Oh, as a matter of fact, I see Greg has actually had to go. I thought we were sticking around for another second or so there, but I was waiting out the music to play us back in. But I guess that was the actual declaration that nope, time to go. Okay. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but duty calls, and it's the season. And look, there's kids out there that need some medical attention, and so fine. Very good. All right. Thanks very much, Greg. We'll be back with you on Wednesday when Joan McCarter joins us. Yeah, we missed Joan last Wednesday. As it turns out, she was just unable to make it and so busy that she couldn't actually even get to the message of, oh, my gosh, I need to tell you I can't make it. That's how busy things were over there. Hopefully this weekend quiets down, but I don't see how that could possibly be the case given what we've just been reviewing as what that happened over the weekend and will continue during the week here. Oh, look at this. That's a good point. I see. I didn't even know this story. MSNBC reporting that alleged, let's say, acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker met with Jared Kushner on Friday. That's interesting. No one really knows why, but of course, he should probably be recused from any of the investigations that would be worrying Jared Kushner, but Ben Yellen pointing out something, Loretta Lynch, tarmac, yada, yada. Yeah, right. Nobody cares. I understand. It only works when Democrats do it. That's the only issue. So, fine. Okay. Whew. Man, let's see. What other things should we pick up on here? Well, too much happening right now, live as we speak, to even catch up with. Let's see what the comments have to say here. They'll go back a ways. Karen pointing out that as far as the chief of staff job goes, Sarah Palin is apparently bored, And in between court appearances, true, good point also, maybe she'd be available to take this job over. She would love that. And she'd probably take it. He could, if he needed to fill the job, I'm sure he could do it that way. It wouldn't make anything better. I mean, we'd all have a good time watching it anyway. Let's see. Michael Musson, actually, speaking of Whitaker, says, he's going to need a new job soon, and he has experience being not qualified to be chief of staff. Just move him from unqualified chief of staff for the Attorney General over to unqualified chief of staff for the President, or the White House anyway, and, that ought to work out just fine. Let's see. Plenty of people noting this here, according to Aaron Rupar, who tweets that on Fox News, Kevin McCarthy is on the air downplaying the Trump campaign's repeated contacts with Russians in 2016. If you're in an international city, that being, I guess, Washington, D.C., or I guess New York City, I suppose, because that's where Trump was, because he wasn't in Washington, D.C. If you're in an international city, people interact with a lot of individuals. And, of course, everybody, including Joan, just mentioned, pointing out, back in the day, of course, there was the audio tape of McCarthy saying there's two people I think Putin pays, Rohrabacher and Trump. Swear to God. I swear to God. He said, swear to God after that. And, everyone seems to have forgotten about that, except us, of course. A lot of weird things about the punditry. They don't seem to care very much about these things for some reason and don't have any institutional memory for them. I'm not certain where that came from. Speaking of which, let me see. I saw somebody, I think, wrote it up in a diary over at Daily Kos, so maybe I'll go over there and pick up that diary. Here we are. It wasn't even, I guess it counts as a diary originally. Laura Clausen wrote this up, and the story, NBC's Chuck Todd, you remember that guy, needs to show receipts or apologize for both sidesing Wisconsin GOP power grab. I heard about this one late in the afternoon. I don't watch the show. I don't watch any of those Sunday shows. And most of the shows, even the good shows that people that listen to this radio program enjoy, I never get a chance to look. I guess I could make time to watch them, but I enjoy instead having people send the highlights around on Twitter and just watch 2 or 3 minutes of the show. So I heard about this one. It's kind of inexplicable, except that it's his fallback position on everything, because I guess he's figured out that's a safe place to be. And if you don't know what the hell to say, you just say that, and they let you go to commercial break, and, no one punches you, and you get out of the show just fine. And of course, your audience tends to love it. They think it's very savvy to be told, it's interesting. I never heard of both sides doing that, but he's a very knowledgeable guy. He says both sides do it. It's just another one of those situations where the ways of the world are so mysterious, and I need people like Chuck Todd to reveal the truth to me, even though, as it turns out, I can't think of any instance of it. And I will say this about Chuck Todd. If there is an instance of it that's genuine, he'll know about it. Now, he's got a pretty good idea of, what stories have broken out there, or he always did anyway, back in the days when I knew him. But even since, I don't hardly ever agree with his analysis these days, because I think it's skewed by the demands of getting and staying on major network television. But, if it happened, if it's something out there, I'm sure he'll be able to pull the fact. Now the question will at that point be, is it equivalent, or is it even a correct reading of what went on? And we can argue forever about that. We'll be right the whole time and he'll be wrong, but you can argue nonetheless. Let's take a what Laura put down here, just by way of organized thought. The traditional media's need to say both sides did a thing when only one side did it is well known, but this is one for legend. Reporting on the Republican power grabs in Wisconsin and Michigan, with Republicans stripping the governors and attorney general's offices of power simply because Democrats will be taking over those offices, NBC's Chuck Todd said this: Democrats have done this in the past to Republican governors in lame duck sessions in other states. And she notes here, Chuck, we're going to need some receipts because it looks like a lie. And so to date, I guess it still remains one. In fact, a reported piece from NBC, and I think Chuck knows some people at NBC, says the opposite. Both national and statewide experts said they had never seen such efforts like the ones in Wisconsin and Michigan before, and that the GOP actions indicate a new level of toxicity that has arrived in state government. I'm going to interrupt the NBC portion of it, the report of it, to say my prediction is that Chuck Todd will come back with something that is not even nearly equivalent and say, see, in this instance, a Democratic lame duck legislature removed some power from an outgoing Republican or an outgoing Democratic governor's office before a Republican could take over it. And it'll be like, well, they took away a couple parking spaces in the garage outside of the State House or something like that. And he'll say, there you have it. I told you they did it. And I don't know. I'm not even sure if he can come up with that. But continuing with the NBC report, until recently, no party has tried to hamstring their opponent's future power to the way the Republicans are doing it now. Bit of an awkward quote, but that's John Chamberlain, professor emeritus of political science and public policy at the University of Michigan. And he told this to NBC News, adding they are a bad sign that state politics is being infected by the toxicity of the, national political environment. See, I added toxicity. It's by the toxic national political environment. He had it right. Well, Chuck, Laura asks, you don't throw out a line like that and just leave it hanging when the evidence is lined up against you. Sure you do. We're out of time, and we'll just have to leave it there. There, I just did it. And now he'll be back next week, and people will want to bring that up, and he'll say, gosh, there's just too much other stuff to cover, like, I don't know, the story of Jerry Falwell Jr. and the pool boy, which tops this story on the recommended list over at Daily Kos. I'm sure you heard about that one. I don't quite understand it, but there was some interesting speculation going on about the connection of that story. If you thought it was unimportant and stupid, and it may be, but you wanted to connect it to the rest of national politics, there were people out there willing to make that connection and pointing out that although it was the case that for whatever reason Jerry Falwell Jr. went into business with a young pool attendant that he and his wife met while staying at a luxury hotel in Miami Beach, well, if you wanted to know why that would have happened, you could guess about it. But the connection apparently was people were saying, well, isn't it odd that the Trump campaign at some point, I guess Michael Cohen, the fixer, who's now, of course, headed to jail soon enough, guaranteed at some point that Jerry Falwell would absolutely endorse Donald Trump in his bid for the presidency. That's not really a hard call to make because, where is Jerry Falwell going to land, with the Republican or the Democrat? It doesn't really matter the fact that the Republican is a horrible person. Jerry Falwell is going to land with the Republican. But I guess it raised some questions about the certainty with which he stated this. And then people were then speculating yesterday, what if the Trump camp knew about this story and how damaging it could be to the Falwell family, and I guess made some sort of threats. The idea is that they would have made some sort of threat of revealing this information as a way of blackmailing Falwell into making the endorsement. Although, again, I have my doubts about the necessity of doing such a thing. So all of that is speculative. People had a good time putting it out there just to connect it to current events. I'll make note of it. It's certainly possible. It's a great Trump play because it doesn't make any goddamn sense whatsoever. However, if there's one thing I could tell you about Trump, well, I've been telling you about Trump for like 3 years. So if there's one thing he really loves is having it, whatever it is, over somebody else. He loves to be able to hint to them that he knows their secrets, even when he doesn't need to blackmail them. He just likes to have that and likes to say that, even if it's not true. loves to make that threat. So, I don't think it's totally idle speculation. I don't think it's without basis. And it may even connect to more than just that. It may also be something that, for whatever reason, Russians knew and wanted to let Trump know that he could know it too. We would clue him in on it, and that he could have fun messing around with Falwell's for that. Although the necessity of it, like if he had good lawyers and good staff, they would say, nah, I appreciate the effort, but don't plant that with us. We don't need it. It's going to get us in trouble. We don't want to know. Nobody needs to bribe Jerry Falwell to endorse a Republican for president. That's just superfluous. And if you guys think we need that, you don't understand American politics. But maybe they do. All they had to understand was, we understand Donald Trump. We don't understand American politics maybe, but we know what makes Donald Trump tick, because it's what makes us tick, which is why we love him so much. Anyway, crazy story out there. You can read all about it from BuzzFeed, and a couple other outlets have covered this story. It's salacious, I guess. Not that awfully salacious, but it is. People will enjoy it for the hypocrisy value, of course. The Falwells wrapped up in something like this. Okay, that really can't be anything we're going to spend any more time on. Let's go over to what's in Pocket and take a look through what's circulating. Let's see. How about this? Speaking of the Republican power grabs in Wisconsin and Michigan, something to grab onto in terms of what to do about it. I'm sure you can glean from this piece what it is that you might take away from it. The corporate donors behind a Republican power grab. Dave Leonhardt writing this up over at the New York Times. And basically just a list of corporate entities making campaign contributions to the people behind this dirty work. You can decide for yourself how connected you think those donations are. And of course, in the meantime, or while you're thinking it over, you might be the sort of person interested in letting their corporate headquarters know that you, might stay away from their business as a result. Let's get through it here. Right up at the top, we get a name: Walgreens. Walgreens portrays itself as the friendly neighborhood drugstore. It gives flu shots to children, for God's sake. Helps communities after storms, donates to charity, and makes feel-good advertisements trumpeting its various good deeds. But Walgreens also has a tougher side, one you won't see in those ads. To protect a tax break, for instance, the company has allied itself with Wisconsin's brutally partisan Republican Party. They're the ones who like to protect tax breaks. That's true. That party is now in the midst of a power grab, stripping authority from Wisconsin's governor and attorney general solely because Republicans lost those offices last month. The power grab comes after years of extreme gerrymandering, which lets Republicans dominate the legislature despite Wisconsin being a closely divided state. And it's not even that closely divided anymore. Many, many more Democrats many more people cast votes for Democrats in those races than Republicans. Wisconsin's Republicans, though, really are trying to undo democracy. When I asked Stephen Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt, the political scientists who wrote the recent book How Democracies Die, about the situation, they agreed that the Wisconsin power grab was the sort of move their book describes. If it continues, it can lead to the breakdown of a political system. I guess we need to ask those guys whether Democrats did any of them. So, you might think that an organization that claims to care about community values would speak up. No, probably not. But Walgreens has not. Neither have corporate supporters of Wisconsin Republicans like Microsoft, Dr. Pepper, Snapple, or I guess that's the same company, Dr. Pepper Snapple. Dr. Pepper Snapple, paging Dr. Pepper Snapple. Apparently they produce both products, and you got to know that in order. I don't know how you put the emphasis there, but all right. That company which produces those two popular beverages, J.P. Morgan Chase or Humana. It's yet another example, alongside soaring CEO pay and stagnant worker wages, of corporations abdicating the leadership role they once played in America. Is that a reference to, the article we read last week about corporate accountability, stockholder versus stakeholder? That was fun. The story of Walgreens in Wisconsin has its roots in a decade-old court case. That's interesting. Let's hear about that. In 2008, the state Supreme Court ruled in favor of an aggressive tax strategy by the company in a case known as Walgreens versus City of Madison. When calculating the property taxes it owed, Walgreens used an artificially low valuation of its stores. It did not pay taxes based on the actual value of those stores as reflected by their purchase price and rent. Instead, it took into account the value of vacant stores nearby. Interesting. The court ruling allowed this dark store practice by Walgreens and other retailers, costing cities and towns millions upon millions of tax dollars. The resulting budget shortfalls, local officials point out, have caused taxes on families and small businesses to rise in Wisconsin, more so than in neighboring Minnesota. So just a timeout here. Does everybody understand what the play is here? Rather than say, I have a store worth $1 million in Madison, based on, what did they say? It says the actual value of their stores based on the purchase price and the rent they're paying now, or I suppose either one of the two. I don't know why you would rent a building from yourself that you would already purchase, but hey, that's possible too. That does happen in the corporate world. But based on regular factors where if you or I did it, well, how much is that worth? Well, this is what I paid for it, so I guess that's what it's worth. That's normal economics. But I stopped to point out that this is the work of the law and economics folks, who I bring up from time to time. They're the ones that come up with ideas like this, which are not crazy from top to bottom, but are novel in their application to, your tax valuations and court cases about your taxes. What they're saying is, sure, I paid $1 million for this store, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's still worth $1 million. If I go to sell it today and I can only sell it for $900,000, isn't it worth $900,000? Why would it be worth $1 million if I can't get $1 million for it? Well, okay, that step I understand. I get the point. Why would you only get $900,000 for it? Well, everybody knows that there are a bunch of empty storefronts in the area, and that, of course, it looks like crap. It's indicative of some depressed consumer spending at the minimum in the area, and it makes it look like you're in a declining area, and it makes it more difficult to pull in customers. Customers don't want to stroll the streets in between abandoned or closed storefronts. It's depressing. It makes it look like that's not the upscale place to be, and all of which is kind of true. And then you argue, well, that leads us to make fewer sales, just aesthetically speaking, and just as you found out during the foreclosure crisis. If you had a home for sale that was on a block where there were 3 or 4 other houses that were no longer occupied and were in foreclosure, that drives your price down when you go to sell your house, although there's many factors that go into that. One is, of course, the impact of having so many, particularly if the now abandoned homes are in disrepair, drives the aesthetics of the neighborhood down, and therefore the potential selling price of your home down. But then also, of course, there's the more direct and understandable impact of having a market saturated with other homes, similar homes in the same neighborhood for sale for considerably less than you're asking. So that's not the only reason it would depress prices. But anyway, the law and economics argument here is, the current market value of this thing is considerably less because of the empty stores nearby. And it's difficult to argue definitively against that. And law and economics types have been successful, therefore, and maybe they had some help in training of the judges who sat for this case who may have been trained in law and economics, either in school or in one of the seminars, to understand, there are other economic factors that we need to take into account here. It's not as simple as what did you pay for it? Well, then that equals the market value of it. That market value can fluctuate. We all learned that in basic economics. And here's an argument for why it would have been revised downward. And so now, when in accepting Walmart's argument for it, we now open up the floor to everybody else in Madison, or everywhere else for that matter, where there might be empty storefronts, to lower their tax bills by using this same practice. And of course they're going to want to, because everyone wants to lower their tax bills. It's just throwing in a little reminder of what law and economics is for, basically, and what it's capable of doing, and why it is worth watching, if not necessarily easily labeled as so dangerous. Worth watching when you find out that judges, a few at a time, are being wined and dined for a long weekend somewhere, and are instructed how to receive such arguments and how to translate them into new legal precedent that allows the rest of the business community to take advantage of this same innovation, if you want to call it that. Okay, so back to the article here. The Walgreens loophole is deeply unpopular based on the results of a non-binding ballot initiative across Wisconsin. And last year, a bipartisan group of state legislators began a push to change the law, but then, somewhat mysteriously, the effort died. The legislature's Republican leaders, including Robin Vos, the Assembly Speaker, and Scott Fitzgerald, the Senate Majority Leader, appeared to play a crucial role in the demise of the measure, as the body's leaders often do. A few weeks later, Walgreens donated $1,000 to Vos. Over the summer, it donated another $6,000 to the committee to re-elect a Republican Senate. A couple of weeks before Election Day, the company gave $1,000 to Fitzgerald. These donations weren't simply a matter of spreading money around. Walgreens did not donate to state-level Democrats this year, as it has in the past. So it's not even both sides. Although you might wonder, well, I don't know, $1,000 here, $1,000 there, even $6,000 to the committee to re-elect this Republican Senate, but not even attributable to just basic corporate bet hedging. It's all Republican. Well, okay then. They back the Republican Party in Wisconsin. I suppose you can hang that label on them. If you're opposed to the power grab there, you ought to let Walgreens know that you found out. The sums here may not be enormous, the article continues, but neither are the budgets for local campaigns. That's true too. Even more important is the message that Walgreens is sending to politicians. We don't care if you undermine democracy so long as we get to keep our tax break. That's true. It would be healthier for companies to spend a little more time thinking about the meaning of these donations, as Judd Legum, author of the political newsletter Popular Information, told me. You hear from Judd all the time on the show. Right now, it's all transactional. In recent months, Legum's reporting has caused Facebook, Google, Walmart, Major League Baseball, and others to ask for the return of donations to politicians whose values the companies were not comfortable defending. So far, Walgreens has not been willing to do the same in Wisconsin. I asked the company last week what it thought about the recent events in Wisconsin, and it ducked the question. But Phil Caruso, a Walgreens spokesman, told me the company was, quote, in the process of evaluating, unquote, the situation. So perhaps you could help them evaluate that if you're a Walgreens customer. The silence of major companies is disappointing because they could actually make a difference. Republican politicians care about the opinions of their corporate backers. If corporate America refuses to speak up, the attacks on democracy will become more common. The one in Wisconsin follows a similar power grab in North Carolina 2 years ago, and Michigan Republicans are now trying to execute their own version. In Ohio and Missouri, there are less blatant but still alarming attempts to overturn the will of the voters. I realize that being able to operate in a well-functioning democracy doesn't bring the same obvious bottom-line benefits as, say, a tax break, but our corporate leaders are making a big mistake if they decide that democracy doesn't matter. I don't know how big the mistake is for them, though. Yeah, interesting. And I don't think we're up to speed on all of the lesser attempts in Ohio and Missouri to overturn the will of the voters. I'm not. You may be, and if you are, maybe you could clue us in on that, and we can put it on the record for the rest of us. All right. Coming up on another break, we can take a look at what else is out there to catch up on. Maybe we can fit this one in even before the break. I just thought this was a great idea. I thought it was fun. And so did Ian Millhiser over at Think Progress. The hilarious way that the Satanic Temple is fighting Christian nationalism by trolling. That does sound interesting. It's that magical time of year again when children make lists of gifts they want from Santa Claus. Families gather around Christmas trees, and the Satanic Temple reminds state governments of a little thing called the First Amendment. This year, the Illinois State Capitol Rotunda will feature a diversity of religious displays, a diversity of religion display, including a nativity scene, a menorah, how nice, and a statue depicting the hand of Eve offering the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What? Why would you have that? Well, the last display is sponsored by the Satanic Temple, and it features the message, knowledge is the greatest gift. They are funny. The Satanic Tribute to the Fall of Man is part of a campaign by the Satanic Temple that reminds local governments of their obligation not to favor any particular religious view. The temple, it should be noted, is not a devil-worshipping outfit. They are, although, the name certainly would imply that. They're not a devil-worshipping cult. They are more like a band of secular pranksters, according to the story anyway, that troll government institutions which might otherwise give preferential treatment to Christians. And, true. I mean, they always come up with good pranks, and I do sort of hope that they are pranks, because you don't really necessarily want to get too wrapped up in getting cozy with the Satanic Temple if you can help it at all. It's not good PR. Anyway, we'll be back in 1 minute with this and more. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Okay, the mute button giving me a bit of a wrestling match here before we get back on the air. There is more to the Satanic Temple story, and I think you should never cut your Satanic Temple coverage short if you know what's good for you. When Orange County, Florida, permitted a Christian group to pass out Bibles to public school students, that's a problem. For example, the Satanic Temple announced that it would also distribute a book entitled The Satanic Children's Big Book of Activities. You get the idea of where these guys are coming from when they come up with titles like that, in case I hadn't convinced you. In 2015, when Arkansas pushed a bill calling for a Ten Commandments monument to be erected on Capitol grounds, the Satanic Temple sought to build a statue alongside of it of the goat-headed deity Baphomet. I don't know how I'm pronouncing that one correctly or not, or if I am, but I'm not too worried about that one. I don't want to offend anybody, but okay. That one might be all right. Offense intended. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe I shouldn't toy with these things. Okay. I'm worried now. Phoenix, Arizona abandoned. I'm appreciating the jokes. Can I? All right. Phoenix, Arizona abandoned its practice of opening city council meetings with a prayer in order to prevent a member of the Satanic Temple from being able to deliver an opening invocation. I guess I like the Pastafarians better in all of this, although it's definitely the same kind of a joke here. The last of these moves exploited a 2014 Supreme Court decision that initially appeared to be a terrible blow to the separation of church and state, but which has since allowed groups like the Satanic Temple to check Christian nationalism run amok. Town of Greece versus Galloway concerned a town in upstate New York that invited local clergy, almost all of them Christians, gee, how did that happen, to open its board meetings with an invocation. Though the court permitted these opening prayers, its opinion also contained an important caveat that nearly all of the congregations in town turned out to be Christian does not reflect an aversion or bias on the part of town leaders against minority faiths. Justice Anthony Kennedy, remember that guy, wrote for the court, "So long as the town maintains a policy of non-discrimination, the Constitution does not require it to search beyond its borders for non-Christian prayer givers in an effort to achieve religious balancing." The 10 words, "so long as the town maintains a policy of non-discrimination," fuel the Satanic Temple's efforts. Existing First Amendment doctrine permits some displays of religious monuments on government property, and it generally allows legislative bodies to open their session with prayers. But it does not permit the government to discriminate among faiths. If Christian clergy may sign up to deliver prayers, so too then may Satanists. It remains to be seen, however, whether this rule against discrimination will survive now that Kennedy's been replaced by a much more conservative person, Brett Kavanaugh. Just last term, when Kennedy was still on the bench, the court backed Christian Baker, who wanted to ignore an anti-discrimination law. It then upheld the latest version of Trump's Muslim ban. In this Supreme Court, religious liberty is largely a code word for Christian supremacy. We may not have to wait long, he concludes, to learn whether the rule against discrimination among faiths is likely to survive Brett Kavanaugh. This term, the court will decide whether a county government in Maryland is allowed to display a 40-foot-tall Christian cross. There are almost certainly 5 votes on this Supreme Court to hold that the state may do so, but it's unclear whether they will undercut the rule against discrimination in the process. I guess we'll find out shortly. Thanks very much, Ian, for bringing that one to our attention. You don't get a lot of Satanist news these days, and I'm sure 2 people, perhaps, in the audience, maybe more, can appreciate it. All right, let's see. Perhaps now, I don't know, now we should just sort of run with everything else that we have in pocket and get caught up on things somewhat in reverse chronological order. I picked this one up from Jonathan Bernstein in Bloomberg. I thought Greg was going here, but he went to another Bernstein piece, I think. Impeachment is getting more likely. Would you like to read that story? It seems like a fun one. There are still plenty of unknowns, but the president's attempts to conceal his conduct are ominous. Ominous, I say. I'm no lawyer. I am a lawyer. Jonathan Bernstein is not. I am no lawyer, I guess. So I'll leave it to others to analyze the legal trouble that President Donald Trump and his associates appear to be in. Based on what prosecutors have revealed recently, see summaries at Lawfare and Just Security, as well as my Bloomberg opinion colleague Timothy L. O'Brien, who is always a must-read on Trump details. I don't really know that I agree with all of that, but that's what Jonathan Bernstein says. But as far as the politics go, the optics, thank you, Jonathan, I can say that the case for impeachment and removal has become quite a bit stronger than it was a month ago, and at least somewhat more likely to happen. We'll see why. There are plenty of unknowns, of course, but it is more likely. It's true that Special Counsel Robert Mueller hasn't yet accused Trump of wrongdoing in the Russia scandal. Nor is it clear, according to the experts, that Trump broke the law in directing his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, to pay hush money to women so that they wouldn't accuse him of affairs during the 2016 campaign. Beg to differ there. But it turns out that directing Cohen to commit felonies, which prosecutors say Trump did and almost surely have the evidence to prove, may not mean Trump himself committed a crime. So why is impeachment more likely? Because the hush money episode is ugly on its face, whether or not Trump broke the law. Because there's more and more evidence of improper behavior by Trump and his campaign with regard to Russia, and because it's now more obvious than ever that Trump has been lying about both. Remember, impeachment is a political process, not a criminal one. Oh, please. All right. If Congress thinks that what Trump and his associates did constitutes high crimes and misdemeanors, then it doesn't matter if they technically violated the criminal code. That's true, but only as far as it goes. And that's why I think the recent revelations are such a big deal. It's now obvious that Trump has had a strong motive for concealing the truth about his conduct, both with regard to Russia and to his affairs. That matters. Although the public evidence that Trump obstructed justice has always seemed pretty strong, it wasn't clear until recently that he was covering up anything significant. Until last week, Republicans could still plausibly argue that impeaching a president for attempting to derail an investigation he had no reason to fear would be ridiculous. Now that argument wouldn't pass the giggle test. Now, unless Mueller winds up undermining what appears to be a pretty strong obstruction case, it's going to be a lot harder for Democrats to ignore the evidence and for Republicans to deny it. You may be thinking, what have the facts got to do with anything? Won't Democrats want to impeach him no matter what? And won't Republicans support him no matter what? Both sides, right? Yeah. I think the cynical view is actually naive. Oh, well, thanks very much. The facts won't determine everything, but they will be an important factor in what Congress decides to do. Not the only factor. There's public opinion, the president's broader strength or weakness, and not least the extent to which members of Congress still think they can trust Trump on some level. I don't know if that really enters into anything. But if facts were totally irrelevant, George W. Bush and Barack Obama would presumably have been impeached, and that never came close to happening, although came a little closer with George than Barack. Again, and for good reason, I'm not predicting that impeachment is imminent or that it will necessarily happen, only that it's more likely now than it was a few weeks ago. And remember, we still don't know what Mueller is sitting on. Okay. Armando, interested in chiming in on what Trump's tweets from this morning and how the media covered him. Okay. If that is, if it's, I mean, you can do it, period. Absolutely. Doors open for that. Is it relevant to this particular piece or just something you want to cover? If it's, well, either one, you let me know and we'll open the door for you, perhaps at the conclusion of this piece, upcoming, of course, and figure out what's up. I didn't follow all of what he's been tweeting this morning, but let's get up to date on that. All right. So we left off. We don't know what Mueller is sitting on. Again, not predicting that impeachment is imminent or that it will necessarily happen, only that it's more likely. And then a bullet list of 6 points here, I guess, that are supposed to feed that conclusion. 1, Rick Hazen, is this oh no, is this just more things that we're supposed to read? Is that what this is? Yeah, I guess so. Okay, so that's a weird way of presenting that list and just a weird way of ending the article. All right, well, we'll just leave it there then. I guess we're done, Armando, so you can come on by when you are ready. Let me see. I had a couple other bits to add to this. One, I guess, counterpoint to one of the things that he just said, and I'm going to have to find the Twitter thread that had it. So I guess while I'm searching, perhaps Armando, now a good time to dial up here. But I wanted to mention that there are reasons to differentiate the various pieces of the campaign finance crimes and frauds evidenced by the Cohen filings, and to think of them differently than I think most people are doing. Let me just open the door here for Armando. Good morning. How you doing?
Hey, good morning.
Okay. I just let me see if I can grab this relatively recent Twitter thread. Kurt Eichenwald spat out, I guess, I don't know, was it earlier today or last night, but he was trying to remind people of oh boy, it got considerably longer. I think it was only about 15 tweets or so earlier in the morning. It's now expanded to 20 something, but the basics of it were that there are 2 specific payments with which the latest Cohen filings are concerned, and only one of them is dismissible in the way that Republicans are dismissing it, and that I guess Trump is dismissing it this morning as a private transaction about which no one should have any particular concern. You know, forget, of course, you know, he doesn't reinforce the point by saying, well, sure, it was payments to porn stars and Playboy models that I was having sex with that I didn't want anybody to know about. But that's neither here nor there. He's just brushing that aside as a private issue. But there's the great difficulty, and the reason that Mueller is actually, or whoever's going to actually end up prosecuting this thing, the reason prosecutors and investigators are interested in the payments is the way they process them. And that's, I guess that will make people say it's a process crime. But the fact that a large portion of all of this was paid for with Trump organization corporate money, and the whole thing was tagged as a campaign expenditure. I don't want people to find out I had sex with porn stars and Playboy models because I think it'll sink my campaign. And can I take Trump organization corporate money and pay for that cover-up in order to boost my campaign for president? And the answer is no, that's far more serious. And it's a gigantic, there's a whole handful, a basket of crimes that goes along with that. And the only thing that we have to wait for that we haven't been given along with all of these facts is whether or not Mueller knows or will tell us eventually that Donald Trump directed all of this and said, I need you to move corporate money into my campaign, and then from the campaign to my fixer, and then from my fixer to a shell corporation, and from the shell corporation to the women who I need to be quiet. Can you do that for me? All of which the answer should be no, you'll go to jail if you do that. But he went ahead and did it anyway. So I just want to point that out, that even reading Bernstein saying impeachment is much more likely, he's saying, well, it's not because the crime is serious, it's because it worries people politically. There were two crimes discussed. One is a crime, but one that doesn't disturb people for some reason. The other is a giant financial crime for which people go to jail. Well, I wouldn't say all the time, but they're supposed to go to jail a lot for these things. And you should separate the two. And maybe there's more filings to come, whether in Cohen's case or another one. But Mueller, if he's got this, will eventually let go of that fact. That'll make it, let's say, less likely that people will feel comfortable pretending you can't indict Trump because his ruse was successful and he won the presidency. He gave himself a pardon by winning.
Yeah, well,
all right.
I don't know. But the thing I was struck by was this morning was two things. Trump's tweets on the Cohen thing. The Stormy Daniels payment is what he's talking about.
Yes.
And the media just sort of saying Trump says only Cohen responsible for campaign crimes or whatever the story was, what Trump says.
Okay.
But it was demonstrably false when he says it. I just would, again, it'd take 15 minutes to go through what he actually wrote in his tweets. And what we know, Trump's first tweet 3 hours ago, Democrats can't find a smoking gun. Of course, everybody had fun with smoking.
Yes.
Tying the Trump campaign to Russia after James Comey's testimony. I don't even know what James Comey's testimony has to do with anything, but okay.
I forgot to
Let's
even
start
mention
with that. Why would James Comey's testimony be relevant to a smoking gun or the Trump campaign? He wasn't on the Trump campaign. He was fired in May of 2017. Mm-hmm. So it's been a year and a half since then. What else do we know? James Comey doesn't know what anybody else knows since that period. So let's start with that. Makes no sense. And then again, he says smoking gun twice, which is kind of interesting.
Wow.
And no collusion. I don't know who he's quoting. I guess Fox News is what he's saying he's quoting.
Can't tell, or he's just talking to the TV. But yeah, maybe.
All right. Somebody on Fox News apparently said these things, but it literally makes no sense. It's gibberish. James Comey isn't where the smoking gun's going to come from. It's going to come from people who participated in it. James Comey was the guy you fired, so he couldn't find out.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Like, all right, what is he going to tell us? He'll talk to you about how he got fired.
Right. So then he says, that's because there was no collusion. All caps. All right. Well, again, James Comey wouldn't be able to tell us since he got fired in May of 2017 before the investigation really got going. Yeah. Beyond that, James Comey's kind of incompetent, but let's leave that argument for another day.
All right.
So he says, now the Dems, this is the part that I'm focused on. So now the Dems go to a simple private transaction. What simple private transaction? We're all assuming he means Stormy Daniels, right?
We think so.
Wrongly call it a campaign contribution. All right, let's stop for a second. If I think it's worthy of asking the White House, can you tell us what simple private transaction the president is talking about? No, I don't know. Let's suppose it's a normal world. And someone says, well, is he talking about the Stormy Daniels payment? Is he saying that in fact, that was a payment by him to Stormy Daniels a month before the election? because that's what his lawyer said.
Yes.
His lawyer named Rudy Giuliani. Remember? People forget these things. The big, oh my God, Rudy just outed Trump as a liar. He said he didn't know anything about it, had nothing to do with him.
Okay.
People forget all that. So what is he saying? So now Trump is now admitting, yeah, of course I did that transaction. That was me. I was lying to you all that time, just like Rudy told you.
Yeah, and like he just did with the Trump Tower in Moscow. I have no such business. Okay, fine, you caught me, but everybody knew. How did everybody know you were denying it? Well, that's true. I mean, although maybe everyone has absorbed my lesson on how to read Trump comments. I don't have any business in Russia. That means he does.
That means he does. Now, it's interesting because there was a Matt Gartz of Media Matters caught Kilmeade saying, oh, this is no surprise. Anybody who'd read page 6 from 1997 to the present day knew Trump would do these things. It's like, really? He was paying people off to not talk about his picadillos. All right. I'm glad that you admit that now. So we know he's a completely corrupt, lying, conniving crook. Thank you for that, Fox and Friends. Anyway, so if that's what... okay, so why he's saying wrongly calling it a campaign contribution? Because it was a simple private transaction. Okay, now let's go back to the facts. The Stormy Daniels thing started in 2007 because that's when it happened. It was a few months after Barron was born, or 2006.
Yeah, I think 2006, right?
Yeah, I think Barron was 4 months old. So there you go, Melania.
Right.
You got that. So he's admitting that he did this, and according to Fox and Friends, he did this all the time.
They did it at least twice that we know of just from this case. So, yeah.
Just from this case.
Okay.
We though we suspect that Brody one, but we've never gotten to the bottom of that either. Okay, so why is it wrongly calling it a campaign contribution? He says, well, I was just protecting my wife. But according to Brian Kilmeade, all she needed to do was read page 6 and know all about these things.
True, but maybe she didn't do that.
Okay.
I don't know. It's possible. But yeah, right. I think he's stuck now. Trump has to say that it had nothing to do with my campaign. I just didn't want my wife to find out.
Right.
So that's the new line.
Okay. The problem with that is the timing. His wife could have found out in 2011 when Stormy Daniels actually first talked about it.
That could be.
And then, do you remember she tells that whole story how she felt threatened or something? Or maybe she got money then. I don't know.
Right.
Anyway, they executed a new one with that lawyer.
Oh, yes.
Keith, whatever his name was.
Right. We've forgotten about his...
Yeah, people forgot. I've even forgotten his last name. But that guy,
I forgot his name.
There's still so much... I personally think this merits an investigation by the House of Representatives. Bring them all in to tell us the story.
I guess at some point, if he's going to continue
I know
to
people
maintain
think,
it's
tawdry, it's a simple private transaction. No, it isn't. It happened just before the election.
Our law and economics advisors would tell us there's no reason Trump would have arranged for that payment, whether from corporate funds or personal funds, unless he thought it was pivotal to the election. Otherwise, he would have left it alone. He says everybody knew it.
There's, of course, pattern evidence. And David Picker of the National Enquirer is a cooperating witness.
I forgot that he's doing that.
Yes.
Good. Well, we'll hear from him. Well, I don't know how soon, but maybe.
Well, maybe never. My point is, you're a reporter. There are public facts out there. So let's look at his next tweet.
Okay. Oh, my. Okay.
I need my cough button. I can find it.
Yes.
So wrongly call it a campaign contribution, which was not, he says. Okay, well, that's the crux of the matter. You have to prove it was. And John Edwards had to prove it wasn't. And he really didn't prove it. It was just not proven by the prosecution.
Okay.
Remember, it was a hung jury. John Edwards almost went to jail for this. This very thing. In fact, it was farther away in time for John Edwards. And so it doesn't even make sense. So at any rate, so it says wrongly call it a campaign contribution, which it was not. But even if it was only a civil case, like Obama's. What did he talk about, like Obama's? What civil case? What does he say?
I'm not sure what that was supposed to. I mean,
okay, what did he say? I know
I
what he
see.
said
Okay.
because the stupid Fox type people are saying, Obama, Andrew McCarthy is where that comes from. Obama had campaign finance violations on disclosures, and there were some over contributions and things like that. They got a fine of like $400,000 or something,
right.
Which, they give them out. It actually shows you how stupid the FEC rubric is. There should be stiffer penalties for that, so people actually police what they're doing. But leave that aside. But this isn't what Obama did. Obama didn't pay anybody off to be silent.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't conspire with his lawyer to create shell corporations to shield where the money was coming from.
Right. This is just...
And he didn't agree to reimburse his attorney for these shenanigans.
Right.
Alleged by his attorney, by the way. Rudy Giuliani.
Yes, all right.
And he says, but it was done correctly by a lawyer, and there would not even be a fine. But it wasn't done correctly by a lawyer.
No.
The lawyer just pled guilty.
Well, that could also be considered correct.
And then he says, lawyer's liability if he made a mistake. No, that's not true. The lawyer's liability is not because he made a mistake in his disclosures. His lawyer's liability is because he conspired with you and acted at your direction to knowingly and significantly violate campaign finance laws. You both committed a felony. It wasn't a lawyer's liability if you made a mistake. Mm-hmm. If your lawyer's doing what you tell him to do, you're responsible.
I would say so.
All right? So if I says Cohen just trying to get his sentence reduced, what does that mean? I mean, yes, he confessed to a crime and he implicated you. I guess that's true. Then finally he finishes with you. All right, so it's garbage, but if you know the facts, you realize this is all just complete nonsense. So what happens when Bloomberg says, Trump says only Cohen responsible for campaign crime? But that's simply not true. Mm-hmm. You don't report it that way. It's not like this is the first fact we've heard is Trump's comment on some unknowable thing. We know all these things. We can cite Rudy Giuliani. So what do you do as a reporter to cover this? Actually, this opens so many questions that you should be asking the White House for clarification. You should be all over this. These tweets are really stupid. If I'm Trump's lawyer, I'm not happy he sent these tweets.
Well, yeah. Well, who's his lawyer? Who no one knows.
Rudy Giuliani and Jay Sekulow. They're writing an 87-page report, a rebuttal of a report they haven't seen. Theoretically, unless your alleged Attorney General, Matthew Whitaker, has been sharing parts of the report, but I doubt there is a report that is being shared with anybody by Mueller at this point. He's not worrying about reports yet, I don't think.
Certainly could be. Now,
Marcy has her theory that he's just doing reports through these sentencing memos and indictments and things like that. I don't know about that. I actually think we know so little of what Mueller has in mind that it's almost silly for anybody to speculate.
Yeah.
I do think it was interesting, and after this, I'll let you go for your last half hour, that the SDNY wanted a harsh sentence, or a relatively harsh sentence, on Cohen.
Yeah.
They said, yeah, he told us all that, but that's because we had him by the you-know-whats. And it wasn't some act of conscience. It was like, I'm facing 20 years in jail. What do I do to get out of this? Mm-hmm. Which I have to believe is true. But that's always the case when people turn state's evidence, isn't it? I'm not sure why the SDNY is being so so harsh on them. But at any rate, just an example of how you can actually report on Trump's tweets without being a fool.
Yeah.
Fit it into the facts you know.
Yeah, I'm not certain why they continue to do that. I mean, there's plenty of room in tweets these days, but they do continue to just say, here's what he says, and then we'll have to leave it there, just as we'll have to leave it at least for the next 2 minutes. But we can come back and fix it after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Armando is still with us, waiting through the break just to sort of wrap things up. But who knows? It may launch us into a little bit more here.
I'll try to keep it simple and it just not to rehash our 2 minutes, because I think at the end of the day, one of the things that I think, apart from just taking the facts and applying them to whatever Trump says, which just seems to me just a basic point, right?
Yeah.
And if Trump said the sky is red, we'd look out there and say, well, no, it's not. So everything he said in those tweets, in my opinion, was demonstrably wrong, and you should demonstrate that as a reporter. It also leads to new inquiries that you should be making at the White House. But finally, it goes to a point that the whole discussion of whether you should say the word lie with Trump is almost absurd now.
Yes.
I saw Walter Isaacson on TV this morning, and he said it, the president lied about this, and no one got upset about it because there's nothing to get upset about. That's what he does.
Okay. He's
always been a liar. That's what he does. It makes stuff up. I think he said in our aside. And at this point, that's what you have to, if you're a real reporter and you're actually reporting, you have to say, well, yeah, the president said it, but he lies all the time, so this is probably not true.
Yeah.
The Kagro rule of interpreting Trump tweets. It's probably the opposite of what he says.
It's been right more than wrong, though that's not hard because
I can't recall one point in time when I thought he told the truth of anything or was right about anything. I would actually think that would be a more interesting feature. Today, the president told the truth about what? Tell me what he told the truth. Everything else was a lie. Tell me what he told the truth about.
I have a trademarked phrase for that too. All my things are now trademarked. They're not, but they should have been. But between if I think he's lying, it's just say whatever the opposite is of what he just said. That happens to be the truth. That's how you read a Trump comment. And if occasionally he says something that either is accidentally wrong or perhaps even contains an actual truth, but for the purposes of hiding his own previous falsehoods, like, what I mean is he'll say things like, politicians lie all the time. I say, for those, I have the phrase of, he's not wrong, trademark. And that's all it means. It doesn't mean he's right. It just means he's not wrong entirely. Yes, many politicians do lie. And when you catch them, you say so. So that's what I'm doing. You can't what about your way out of this one by saying other politicians lie. It's a dangerous world out there. Lots of dictators do lots of terrible things. I know, but that I just said you're a dictator and you're doing terrible things. And you say lots of terrible dictators do things. And I say, okay, you're not wrong. And you just said you're a terrible dictator. But, that's the best you can do for him is he's not wrong entirely on this. But I've never heard of, I'm at a loss for him saying, here's what actually happened with either something I was involved in or someone else was involved in. Everything else is always an exaggeration of other people's wrongdoing. Even when he's trying to what about he exaggerates the what about side of it, or comes up with one from a million years ago. You know, oh, Khashoggi was murdered. Oh yeah, what about Chappaquiddick? What are you talking about? What's wrong with you?
All right. It's insane. But I'm going to hand you back to your show, but I do want to give you a little piece of expert trolling, and I'm not talking about Matt Stoller. Joe Biden in Burlington, Vermont.
Yeah.
Supposedly on a book
Vermont.
tour, pledged to his son he's stay engaged in the world, and there were shouts of run from a few audience members.
Okay.
I like doing that in Burlington. That was pretty funny.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty subtle trolling, as opposed to what you said. Matt Stoller is bothering everybody this morning.
Yeah, Matt Stoller.
Hey.
He goes after Ruth Bader Ginsburg, calls everybody who supports her a corporatist or something.
Okay,
it's Matt Stoller doing his Matt Stoller thing, which is funny. Because unlike some people, actually, I think he has some good insights on some economic stuff. But he's a jerk. I see it. I mean, he goes about it in a way that just pisses everybody off.
You know what? Yeah, sometimes I think about things like that. There's a couple of people that fit into that category, and I sometimes try and puzzle out: are they jerks? Do they not see when they present things this way that it rubs people that should be on their side the wrong way? Or is it like brilliant Twitter strategy? Like now everybody's talking about it. He knows how to rub people in just that way that they all circulate his thing. And then, and there's still a kernel of truth in it there somewhere. So people start talking about that. Is he a genius manipulator in the way Donald Trump is supposedly a genius manipulator? I think most people just stumble on this stuff, but I suppose there are a few people who actually have raw talent in finding it, and it still disturbs me when they say Donald Trump does, because I just don't think he's smart enough to do it. Matt Stoller would be smart enough to do it, but I don't know how he's doing it.
I don't know why he's doing it, but I do think he's doing number two. I'm more the number one type, where I just
don't let anyone
say things in ways that pisses people off. So even if I have a point, they may agree with me, they're not going to admit it. So that I'm more the one category, but he's in the two, but not necessarily to promote any issue, more to promote himself. Anyway, last thing I will say to you is that British Prime Minister Theresa May has said that the vote in the House of Commons on Brexit will be delayed.
Yes, we did. We heard about that. I guess they just don't have the votes.
They don't have the votes. The EU itself has said, listen, you can just say, oops, didn't mean it, and everyone will forget you even did it.
Yeah, why not? They're doing that all over the United States right now.
Right.
Undoing all of our referenda in the various states. Oh, undo yours too.
If you're following that story at all, I think one of the more interesting issues will be labor under Corbyn, how they handle this situation. Today they're trying to give her a hard time. By the way, the stock Dow down right at the open again, already down a percentage point. I don't know. I hope we're not going into recession, but not good news lately. Yeah. But anyway, that's all I have, and I'll hand you back your last 23 minutes of your show.
Okay, I'll take them. Thanks very much, Armando. And,
thanks, man.
Yeah, all right, you're welcome. We'll hear from you again during the week, I'm sure. And what a time for Daniel Dale to be on break, by the way. Did you all know that he was taking a 3-week break at the end of the year? He signed off of Twitter a couple of days ago, and now nobody knows if the man's lying, or there's nobody out there to contemporaneously catalog them all. I can't believe he would be leaving the job unfilled. He should probably ask somebody else. You don't have to be public about it, but I want you to track things for me. I'm sure I hope he's got an assistant working on it, or another colleague working on it. Anyway, so what was I going to say? I don't know. Trump sucks about something. I forget what exactly, but no, there was something about the last of Armando's comments. Maybe it'll come to me as I plow through a few more things. But anyway, so there's a couple other things we got to get to, and we can't fit them all in. And we're going to have to spend the rest of I guess later in the week, we'll get back to the Saudis and Jared Kushner. This is a major story developing. Yes, I know it's happening. Can't get to it today. There's an awful lot to it. lots of nuance, but I guess the upshot of it is Jared Kushner has been, he's an idiot. He should never have been in this job. He was in way over his head, but all he was ever really in it for was, who cares what national policy is? Who cares what our foreign policy is? Everybody at this point is convinced that as dirty a place as Saudi Arabia is, we have to be involved with them and maintain a relationship with them. That hurdle is easily surmounted, and we don't have to worry about it. And so all I'm really interested in is, given that everybody will grant me the cover to deal with a bunch of, hardball, sharp elbow killers, possibly. I mean, definitely in the case of Khashoggi, we all got to see it, but everybody knew that they were, let's say at best, rough-edged over there in Saudi Arabia. Given the fact that everyone has already accepted that, I should just milk this for all it's worth. There's a tremendous amount of money lying around in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, in Kuwait, in the UAE, and the great benefit of having them all be monarchies is that you only have to get on one person's good side in order to be able to pry loose chunks of $1 billion or more from their sovereign wealth funds. And when I need chunks of billions of dollars, or just want chunks of billions of dollars, I'll turn to them and I'll do whatever favors they want, because we've been doing whatever favors they need for a long time in the name of national security. I'll just throw the national security label on it. But this is how incompetently he has executed a strategy which should be easy to execute from one administration to the next. There's been a lot of work done badly. I mean, well, actually is what I should say, but it's bad work done well to layer case upon case and precedent upon precedent that basically allows for a minimally competent American administration to do whatever it wants to do with regard to Middle East dictatorships and call it national security and shield it from all scrutiny. But these guys are so incompetent and so unprecedentedly personally greedy that they have blown that apart. I guess if there's any positive, if there's any silver lining to all this, it would be, and I don't think it's happening yet, but it would be that we would get to the point where we would realize, yeah, the shield of national security and state secrets ought to be removed, pared back, something like that, because we've always suspected it has been used improperly, but it's a rare thing, and maybe it's just never happened, where a majority of Americans have come to the conclusion seriously and think that they can really point to evidence that it's the case, that foreign policy or statecraft, state secrets, etc., national security excuses have been used to cover up personal looting, personal profit being derived from this as the primary goal. I mean, I think people probably guessed that that was at the heart of what a lot of Dick Cheney was doing. But Dick Cheney had the relative to what's happening now, relatively good sense to tie it to a national security objective, the fight against terrorism, the whatever it is, the development of strong allies in the Middle East region, even if they stand in opposition to everything we supposedly hold dear about democracy. But, and if I happen to profit along the way, great, that's the way I want it, and you can't definitively separate it from at least a cover story about national interests. And Kushner and Trump have not even really bothered to construct that cloak, that cape for what they're doing. And so we'll probably spend some additional time on that during the rest of the week, although now I feel like I should launch into it. But instead, we will take a look at a couple other stories that I think deserve some mention. I think a good job here done on the spot here by Brian Beutler, summarizing, I guess, where we are today in terms of finding out what we did over the weekend about the Cohen case and dealing with the constant refrain from analysts, and again, they're not wrong necessarily, but analyzing things from a standpoint of normality, reminding everybody that in a normal world, a sitting president can't be indicted. That's what they keep saying. And of course, everything that's happening in Trump world is another thing that simply can't or couldn't happen. You're not allowed to indict a sitting president. Oh, yeah? Well, you're not allowed to call world leaders off the record and ask them to lean on the managers of the Sovereign Wealth Fund to pry loose chunks of $1 billion for you either. But they do that. Like, you can't. How could you do that? It wouldn't happen. In normal circumstances, you couldn't. There would be no private conversations off the record between world leaders, you and other world leaders. You wouldn't have the ability to just go unstaffed and meet with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia until 4 a.m. You wouldn't have the ability to have these phone calls unmonitored by others. And to the extent that Kushner knew about that and worried that that might apply to him, he spent plenty of time during the campaign trying to set up unmonitored and unmonitorable by Americans anyway, secure communications through Russia's outlets instead, because he knew that there was a possibility of being listened to. So all of the things that you can't do are out the window when Trump wants them out the window. The one thing we want out the window, can't indict a sitting president. We can't seem to fit that through a window. I could make a bigger window for you. And there are people working on that now. And some of it has to do with arguments like this one. And there have been plenty, but only in the last couple of days. And, Brian has a way of making these points sometimes quicker, sharper. Let's see if he's done the trick here. The law must apply to Donald Trump. It turns out many people think that it won't. There's an argument. Here's the basic premise of the argument that he'll address, which is that we found out over the weekend. It certainly seems a lot like Trump is now implicated in crimes. If you listen to Kurt Eichenwald, there are two distinct ones. One, a sort of general participation in a campaign finance fraud that, he may be duckable if he can somehow prove that he didn't know anything about it and Michael Cohen was just helping him out with paying off Stormy Daniels and he didn't really know. And no one really believes that's the case. But then there's also the one of let's reimburse Michael Cohen by using corporate money that's under my control because it came from the Trump organization and I am the Trump organization. That one seems a little harder to duck and would be a much more serious campaign finance and just straight up regular financial crime. But the deal is, for those who stick by the rule that you can't indict a sitting president, you run into this problem. By the time, if Trump were to be reelected in 2020, by the time he left office, the statute of limitations may have run out on some of the crimes he committed during the campaign. And so it may be that his occupancy of the office of the president, whether he deserves it or not, whether he got it legitimately or not, cheated or not, I don't know. But the occupation of the office is his shield against having the law enforced against him. And that the argument is, well, if you want to enforce the law against a sitting president because the statute of limitations is going to run out, the only way to deal with that is impeach him, remove him from office, which you may or may not have the votes to do, and then charge him once removed, as opposed to better constructive legal arguments like, well, shouldn't we just say, if the law is you can't indict a sitting president, and it's not the law, it's just the opinion about the law that comes from the OLC, and really, what position are they going to take? Other than, no, you can't indict my boss, the president, whoever he may be. But the the thinking is, well, if that's not tolling the statute of limitations, then nothing is. And that's the term that they use for saying, I guess, forestalling, like hitting the timeout button on a statute of limitations. If you are, and there are plenty of instances in which this can happen. If you're involved in a conspiracy and part of the conspiracy is to cover up the conspiracy you're in, then actions that you take that prevent law enforcement officials from finding out about your conspiracy can be said to have tolled the statute, and various other things can do the same thing. In other words, it puts it on hold. If it's a 10-year statute of limitations and you hide all of this information from investigators for 5 years, and then they find out about it, they find out about the crime, they start investigating it, and you hide information, and then 5 years pass, and then you've now reached the 10-year statute of limitations and say, woo, I got away with the crime. They're very successful, and it's a very easy thing to do, to go in and say, no, the statute of limitations has been tolled for 5 years. We have 5 more years to investigate this guy and bring charges, because he was actively hiding information that would otherwise have come to light for us, and we would have beat the statute of limitations by a long shot, except for what he did. You can't do that. So, I mean, if there's just a supposed rule out there, no matter what I did, you can't charge me with it while I'm president, and the statute of limitations runs out before I leave office, it's certainly theoretically you should be able to go to court and say, come on. Now, there's no rule that says that is one of the things that tolls the statute of limitations, but that's because no one ever thought to put a rule like that in the books, because a president who did that would be impeached, and we all knew it, except it turns out that no, he won't be impeached, because if there's one lesson we've absorbed, it's that impeaching a Republican is by definition overreach. And we learned this by experiencing ever since Nixon. Every 15 years or so, Republican presidents do something that clearly is impeachable, but we can't impeach them because impeaching them is overreach. And it's gone from Nixon and Watergate to Iran-Contra, as between both, the October surprise / Iran-Contra, taking it from the Reagan administration into the George H.W. Bush administration, and then, of course, into the next Republican administration after that, Iraq War and the illegality of it, and the indefinite detention and the torture and the warrantless surveillance, all of which warranted a serious look at impeachment as well. And then 15 years later, after that one simmers down, we have Trump and all the things that he should have been impeached for. And I even forgot the Cambodia situation for Nixon. And maybe it goes even further back. I don't know. But in all this time, where every 15 years Republicans keep insisting on handing us constitutional crises that can't be dealt with in any other way, and then just aren't dealt with because, oh my God, impeachment is overreach, we don't do anything about it, and the crime gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse because they realize they can get away with more and more and more and more and more. In all that time, there have been impeachments. There was an impeachment of a Democrat, which everybody now says, well, you see, that was overreach because they lost seats in the House. All right, yeah, that's huge. I mean, that's exactly what we really have to worry about. Okay, in all that time, one guy got impeached, and it was a Democrat, and they're willing to pretend that was overreach, but not in the same way. And we haven't even made the move. They actually did it and sent it to trial. Anyway, Brian, back to Brian's point on all of this. Under normal circumstances, he says, Donald Trump's lawyers would be preparing him to be indicted, or he'd be under indictment already. And I guess here by normal circumstances, we mean circumstances in which Donald Trump is not the president, because that's a very abnormal thing. However, he may mean more than that. A plain reading of the sentencing memo federal prosecutors in New York wrote for Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, reveals that the Justice Department believes Trump committed at least one felony in 2016 when he ordered Cohen to pay hush money to his former mistresses and facilitated the payments. Both Trump supporters, like Andrew McCarthy, who was once a federal prosecutor in the same New York district, and Trump critics, like former FBI Director James Comey, who was once the top federal prosecutor in that office, agree on the gravity of the situation. The government, Comey said, doesn't include allegations like the one in the Cohen memo unless it is seriously considering charging the person. The only thing standing between Trump and an arrest, bail hearing, and trial or plea is the tragic fact that he is the president. And the Justice Department has essentially contrived a rule that makes it difficult, if not impossible, for federal prosecutors to indict sitting presidents. In fact, DOJ holds that the Constitution prohibits such indictments. And it may, or it may not. And unfortunately, we're in a bad situation for asking that question because there are 5 justices of the Supreme Court who, for convenience's sake, would say it does. But you never know. And so, by the way, the simplest answer to can you indict a sitting president is, of course you can. Go ahead and do it. Will they quash it? Maybe. But go ahead and do it. The opinion, logically indefensible, completely atextual, and never tested in court, doesn't place Trump completely out of danger. But in a perverse way, the prospective nature of the legal jeopardy Trump faces does create new and unacceptable risks for the rest of us, and those need to be addressed, with House Democrats in the lead, before they break the democracy, if there's any left, I would add. The government's operating theory is that Congress would impeach and remove a president who committed crimes that needed to be prosecuted, at which point the normal course of justice would resume. It does not contemplate the possibility that a supine Congress would simply shrug at the president's criminal activity and proceed as though nothing had happened. The crime prosecutors say Trump committed in 2016 carries a 5-year statute of limitations. Were he to be removed from office quickly or lose his campaign for re-election, those prosecutors could and likely would swoop in and charge him with violating election law. Trump's freedom, his bodily autonomy, now appears to turn almost entirely on his ability to remain in power through at least 2021. By allowing Trump to serve in limbo, temporarily immune from justice, Congress and DOJ have transformed the stakes of the 2020 election in Trump's mind into a make-or-break, can't-lose contest to preserve his own liberty. And if he concludes that he can only hold power by breaking America, then he will break America to keep himself out of prison. The 2020 election is going to be poisonous no matter what. Trump is an immoral and toxic person who can't grapple maturely with even the prospect of defeat, but what few limits of decency and ethics he places on himself or others place on him will fall if the consequence of losing isn't just humiliation, but imprisonment. It also creates a near certainty that if he does lose, he will refuse to accept the results of the election. So you're asking the rest of us to break democracy on his behalf, basically. And remember, this is not a suicide pact. If Trump had even a modicum of shame or a trace of public spirit, he would begin phasing down right away. When, amid the Watergate scandal, prosecutors caught Richard Nixon's vice president, Spiro Agnew, at the center of a completely different criminal bribery conspiracy, Agnew was publicly defiant, but his lawyers negotiated a surrender. Agnew would resign, taking himself out of the line of succession if prosecutors agreed not to charge him for any crimes that would yield jail time. Trump will not resign, particularly as DOJ rules essentially hold that he's unaccountable for his crime if he stays in office until 2021, or 22, I guess. That's what he says here, but I think he means 21. It's hard to imagine Trump, 22, that's right. It's hard to imagine Trump resigning, even if he believed Vice President Mike Pence would grant him a corrupt pardon upon succeeding to the presidency. If we're to preserve a system, if only in theory, in which nobody is above the law, something will have to change. The proper thing would be for Congress to begin an impeachment inquiry next January. Of course, we'll see whether that ever happens. A wide-ranging one, but inclusive of the allegation in the Cohen sentencing memo. Such an inquiry would not be controversial on the merits because the alleged conduct cuts right to the heart of why Congress has impeachment power to begin with. Trump cheated to win the presidency. If Congress responds not just by imposing no penalty, but by not even attempting to impose a penalty, it will create terrible incentives for Trump and all future presidential candidates. Exempting Trump from an inquiry because he remains popular with Republican voters or because Senate Republicans would never vote to remove him would be a cowardly abdication and would normalize conduct that should be impeachable. If House Democrats refuse to confront Trump in this way, they could nevertheless remove the perverse incentive Trump now faces by closing the loophole DOJ created. If DOJ will not withdraw or revise its opinion on indicting sitting presidents, Congress can pass legislation to stop the statute of limitations clock on all crimes during time served in the presidency or vice presidency. The 5-year statute of limitations on Trump's election crime would thus extend years past Trump's presidency, even if he serves full two terms. Taking these steps would unrig the game so that the country would no longer be locked in a dangerous contest with an unscrupulous man who has everything to lose, but the current circumstances cannot stand through the election. The stakes are just too dire. And so I would ask you, I mean, he's right, but will anybody do it? Probably not. But who would object right now on the merits out loud to tolling that statute?
From Daily Co's
we'll
Radio
find out.
On networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
All right, here's how I'll put it in the last seconds. I would like to know who would vote against a otherwise neutral statute that says if a president commits crimes, he should be allowed to be charged with them after he leaves office. You would expect that people would just say, oh, well, he's not committing a crime, right? So I'm okay with it. Watch him say it anyway.